Niemann opens with pawn to e4, and we are live at the FIDE World Blitz Championship. Hans Niemann versus Magnus Carlsen. You know the history here. Let's just play chess, gentlemen. Carlsen responds with pawn to e5. Classical, symmetrical, completely normal. No bomb clouds today, folks. This one's a serious one. Probably. Niemann plays knight to f3, developing and attacking the e5 pawn. Carlsen defends with knight to c6. Standard stuff. Niemann plays bishop to c4, the Italian game. Going straight for f7, classic aggressive setup. Carlsen mirrors with bishop to c5. Both bishops aiming at each other's weak f-pawns. This is basically two guys pointing finger guns at each other. Niemann plays pawn to d3, a quiet, modern, somewhat anticlimactic way to handle the Italian. I don't want to get into any sharp theory against Magnus Carlsen in 3-minute blitz energy. Carlsen develops knight to f6, completely unbothered. Both players castle, Niemann first, then Carlsen right behind him. Two kings tucked in, ready to go to war from a safe distance, like two guys texting insults from across the room instead of fighting. Niemann plays pawn to h3, making Luft and avoiding any annoying pins. Carlsen mirrors with pawn to h6. Symmetry city. At this point, you could fold the board in half and the pieces would match up. Niemann plays pawn to c3, supporting the center and preparing d4 down the line. Carlsen plays pawn to d6, solidifying his own center. This is the most two cautious chess engines politely shaking hands opening I've seen in a while. Niemann activates the rook to e1, prepping for central expansion. Carlsen plays pawn to a6. Just a little prophylactic move, stopping any bishop by 5 ideas, very tidy. Niemann develops knight b1 to d2, heading toward f1 and then g3 in that classic Italian game knight shuffle. Carlsen plays rook to e8, matching the rook development on the same file. The symmetry is almost concerning at this point. Are they playing chess or are they synchronized swimming? Niemann continues the knight tour. Knight to f1 on its way to g3. Carlsen retreats the bishop to a7, tucking it into the corner, safe and sound, still eyeing the long diagonal. Niemann completes the maneuver. Knight to g3, a nice flexible square. Carlsen plays bishop to e6, directly challenging the bishop on c4. He wants this trade, and Niemann obliges. Bishop takes e6. Carlsen recaptures a rook takes e6. Slightly unusual, recapturing with a rook instead of a pawn, keeping the structure intact and the rook active on a nice open file. Niemann plays pawn to d4, finally breaking the symmetry and going for some central expansion. Carlsen responds rook to a8, repositioning back, having achieved what he wanted from the trade. Niemann develops the bishop to e3, eyeing the long diagonal and supporting the center. Carlsen captures pawn takes d4, trading off the central tension. Niemann recaptures bishop takes d4. Carlsen plays knight takes d4, trading another pair of pieces, simplifying. Niemann takes back pawn takes d4. And now we have a real structural feature, an isolated-ish pawn situation forming for white. Carlsen plays pawn to c6, solidifying and preparing some queenside expansion. Niemann plays queen to b3, eyeing b7 and creating a little pressure. Carlsen responds rook to b8, defending calmly. No drama, just very solid. I am simply better than you and I will prove it slowly. Chess from Magnus. Niemann activates the last rook to d1, getting everybody connected. Carlsen plays rook to a6. Repositioning yet again, this rook has officially traveled more than most tourists do in a week. Niemann plays queen to c2, repositioning, looking for a plan. Carlsen plays pawn to g6, quietly making some luft and adjusting the structure. Niemann plays queen to c1, kind of a strange retreat, regrouping, looking for a better square. Carlsen tucks the king to g7, getting it nice and safe before any real fighting begins. And now, Niemann plays queen to f4. Suddenly some actual ambition, eyeing the king side. Carlsen plays queen to a7, defending solidly and keeping everything connected. Niemann plays knight to h4, heading toward a more aggressive post, maybe eyeing g6 or f5. Carlsen tucks the king to h7, getting that king extra safe, just in case anything spicy happens. Niemann retreats knight to f3. Okay, never mind. That knight trip to h4 was a quick little vacation, and now it's back home. Carlsen repositions rook to e8, and then Niemann plays pawn to e5. Finally, some real tension, pushing into the center and gaining space. Carlsen responds with knight to d5, centralizing beautifully and creating a real outpost. Niemann plays queen to g4, getting active, creating some real threats on the king side. Carlsen captures pawn takes a 5, grabbing the pawn right back. Niemann recaptures rook takes a 5, keeping material balanced and staying active. Carlsen plays bishop to b8, a quirky little retreat, getting the bishop out of any potential tactics and repositioning for later. Niemann plays rook takes a 6, trading off a pair of rooks. Carlsen recaptures queen takes a 6, and now the queen is centralized and powerful. Niemann plays queen to h4, repositioning, trying to create some kind of attacking chances. Carlsen plays queen to e7, offering the queen trade, very confident, I don't need my queen to beat you. Niemann accepts, queen takes e7, and Carlsen recaptures rook takes e7. The queens are off. We are now in an endgame, and if you've learned anything from every single Magnus Carlsen game ever played, you know this is exactly where things get terrifying for his opponent. Niemann plays knight to f1, repositioning the knight toward the center. Carlsen plays king to g7, centralizing his own king, getting ready for the long grind. Niemann plays pawn to g3, making some luft of his own. Carlsen plays rook to a2, infiltrating the second rank. The rook just walks right into enemy territory like it owns the place. Niemann plays knight b1 to d2, regrouping the pieces to deal with the intrusion. Carlsen plays bishop to a7, repositioning back to that long diagonal, patient as ever. Niemann plays king to f1, getting the king involved in the endgame. Carlsen plays rook to a7, retreating slightly, regrouping. Niemann plays pawn to a3, a quiet little move, shoring up the queen side. Carlsen plays knight to c7, repositioning, very flexible, looking for the best square. Niemann plays knight to c4, centralizing. Carlsen plays rook to d7, going after the d4 pawn, applying pressure. Niemann plays knight to e3, defending and repositioning. Carlsen plays knight to a6, another flexible knight move, probing for weaknesses. Niemann plays knight to c2, regrouping yet again. Both sides are just shuffling pieces around like it's a game of chess musical chairs. Carlsen plays pawn to f5, starting to create some real activity, gaining space and preparing to open lines. Niemann plays king to e2, continuing to centralize. Carlsen plays king to f6. The king joins the party too. Everybody's centralizing. It's like a family reunion in the middle of the board. Niemann plays king to d3. Carlsen plays pawn to c5, striking at the center, creating real targets. Niemann plays king to c3, getting in front of things. Carlsen plays pawn takes d4 check, opening lines with check, very precise. Niemann recaptures knight f takes d4. Carlsen plays knight to g5, repositioning actively. Niemann plays rook to f1, defending the f-pawn area. Carlsen plays knight to e4 check, forking the king with a check. Niemann steps king to d3. Carlsen plays knight to c5 check, another check. This knight will not stop harassing the king. Niemann plays king to e2, dodging. Carlsen plays knight to a4, repositioning, eyeing b2. Niemann plays knight to f3, defending. Carlsen plays rook to a7 check. More checks. The king is getting absolutely no peace. Niemann blocks with king to d2. Carlsen takes knight, takes b2. Grabbing a pawn, completely unbothered by the chaos. Niemann plays knight to b4, trying to create some activity of his own and maybe trap the rook. Carlsen plays rook to d7 check. Yet another check. Niemann plays king to c3. Carlsen plays knight to a 4 check. The knight keeps giving checks too. This king has had a worse day than Magnus's king did against Shevchenko, and that king got bong-clouded on purpose. Niemann plays king to c2. Carlsen plays knight to c5, repositioning. Niemann plays knight to d2, regrouping yet again. Carlsen plays knight to e6, flexible, probing. Niemann plays knight to b3, defending. Carlsen plays pawn to g5, gaining more kingside space. Niemann plays pawn to f3, solidifying. Carlsen plays bishop to b8. Repositioning the bishop yet again, this bishop has more frequent flyer miles than most airline pilots. Niemann plays pawn to g4, gaining some space of his own. Carlsen plays knight to f4, centralizing, creating threats. Niemann plays rook to e1, activating. Carlsen plays bishop to e5, beautifully centralized, dominating the long diagonal. Niemann plays king to b1, tucking the king away from danger. Carlsen plays rook to c7, repositioning, keeping the pressure on. Niemann plays rook to d1, defending. Carlsen plays rook to c3, infiltrating deep into white's position. Niemann plays king to a2, sidestepping. Carlsen plays rook takes f3, grabbing material and ripping the position apart. Niemann plays knight to c5, desperately trying to create counterplay. Carlsen plays rook takes h3, another pawn falls. The rook is just going on an absolute shopping spree through white's position. Niemann plays knight to d7 check. Finally, some real activity from white, forking and creating threats. Carlsen plays king to e6, calmly stepping into the center, completely unfazed by a knight check. The king just looks at the knight like, cute, but no. Niemann plays knight to c5 check again. Carlsen plays king to f7. Niemann captures pawn, takes f5, grabbing a pawn finally, getting some material back. Carlsen plays king to f6, chasing right back. Niemann plays rook to d7, activating, trying to create complications. Carlsen plays king takes f5, grabbing the pawn right back, completely fearless. Niemann plays rook takes b7, snatching another pawn. Carlsen plays pawn to a5, pushing the passed pawn, not worried about material at all anymore, just running the clock and running the pawns. Niemann plays knight to c6, repositioning. Carlsen plays rook to h2 check. Yet another check. This poor king has not had a single peaceful moment this entire game. Niemann plays king to b1. Carlsen plays bishop to f6, repositioning, covering key squares. Niemann plays rook to b5, activating, trying to create play. Carlsen plays king to g4. The king strolls forward, completely unbothered, like he's just out for an evening walk through a war zone. Niemann plays knight to a4, centralizing, creating some threats of his own. Carlsen plays bishop to g7, repositioning to a safer square while keeping the long diagonal covered. Niemann plays rook takes a5, grabbing the pawn, trying to create some passed pawn counterplay of his own. Carlsen plays rook to b2 check. The checks just keep coming and coming. This is basically a one-sided boxing match at this point, except every punch is a chess move. Niemann plays king to c1. Carlsen plays knight to e2 check. Another fork, another check, another problem for white to solve. Niemann plays king to d1. Carlsen plays knight to c3 check. The pieces are just swarming the king from every direction. Niemann is forced to play knight takes c3, trading off, trying to relieve some pressure. Carlsen recaptures bishop takes c3. Niemann plays rook to c5, repositioning, trying to find some kind of fortress. Carlsen plays bishop to fe6, repositioning to a safer, more useful square. Niemann pushes pawn to a 4 enikbur, trying to create a passed pawn of his own, the last desperate gambit. Carlsen plays rook to a2, going after the a-pawn immediately, shutting that idea down before it even starts. Niemann pushes pawn to a5 anyway. Carlsen plays pawn to h5, and now Carlsen has his own passed pawn rolling too. Niemann plays knight to b4, repositioning, trying to create counterplay. Carlsen plays rook to a4, going after the knight and the pawn simultaneously. Niemann plays rook to c4 check, finally landing a check of his own, a nice change of pace for him. Carlsen steps king to f3, completely calm. Niemann plays rook to c6, repositioning. Carlsen captures rook takes b4, grabbing the knight, simplifying into a completely winning rook endgame. Niemann plays rook takes f6 check, recapturing the bishop with check. Carlsen plays king to g3, stepping out of danger and continuing to escort his passed pawns. Niemann pushes pawn to a6, his own passed pawn, racing to try to create something, anything. Carlsen plays rook to a4, covering and controlling, not letting the pawn get anywhere important. Niemann plays king to c2, activating the king for the pawn race. Carlsen pushes pawn to h4, his own pawn marching toward promotion. Niemann plays king to b3, trying to support his own pawn's journey. Carlsen plays rook to a1, getting behind his own pawn, clearing the path. Niemann plays king to b2, shuffling around, trying to find some kind of fortress or blockade. Carlsen plays rook to a5, repositioning, covering everything perfectly. Niemann plays king to b3. Carlsen pushes pawn to h3, getting closer and closer to promotion. The pawn can see the finish line. Niemann plays king to b4, desperately trying to catch up to the action, but he is simply too slow. Carlsen plays rook to a1, one more repositioning, perfectly placed. Carlsen pushes pawn to h2. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the final move of the game. The pawn is one square from promotion. There is nothing white can do to stop it. And Niemann resigns. What an absolute saga. This game started off looking like the most boring, symmetrical, two grandmasters politely agree to not fight Italian game you've ever seen. Mirror moves, mirror development, mirror everything. And then somewhere around move 40, it just turned into Magnus Carlsen's knight and rook, taking turns giving checks to a king that simply could not find one single moment of peace for the rest of the game. Niemann fought hard, grabbed some pawns, tried to create his own passed pawn race, but in the end, Magnus just had more pieces doing more things, and his passed pawns got there first. 85 moves of pure attrition, and in the end, the King of Norway does what he always does, grinds you down until there's nothing left. Absolutely brutal stuff from Magnus Carlsen.